Good morning and welcome to day 8 of 365 as we go through the Bible in a year. We're following together the adventure timeline created by Jeff Cavins. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz, and today we're going to be reading through Genesis 16 to 17, Job 5 to 6, and lastly Proverbs 1:20 to 33. Just a little introduction about Genesis 16 to 17. We continue to read about Abram and his wife Sarai, and in this reading there's an emphasis on her barrenness, and because of her barrenness both her and Abram become impatient, and so she has Abram sleep with her Egyptian maidservant Hagar, and she bears him a son, Ishmael. And God later in the reading ratifies his covenant with Abram by having Abram, his servants, and his son Ishmael circumcised. And in the Job reading, in the midst of Job's suffering, we hear now from his friend Eliphaz the Temanite and Job's response to him following that. And then our last reading, Proverbs, we see speaking on the consequences of rejecting the wisdom of God. And this brings an end to chapter 1. Let us read. Genesis chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." And Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers." She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will confirm my covenant between me and you will greatly increase your numbers." Abram fell face down, and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after me. The whole land of Canaan, where you are now an alien, I'll give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you, and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household, or bought with money from a foreigner, those who are not your offspring. Whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. God also said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abram said to God, If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. And God said, Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful, and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear you by this time next year. When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God went up from him. On that very day Abraham took his son Ishmael, and all those born in his household or bought with his money, and every male in his household, and circumcised them, as God told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13. Abraham and his son Ishmael were both circumcised on the same day, and every male in Abraham's household, including those born in his household or bought from a foreigner, was circumcised with him. Our next reading, Job 5-6. Call if you will, but who will answer you? Said Eliphaz. To whom of the holy ones will you return? Resentment kills a fool, and envy slays the simple. I myself have seen a fool taking root, but suddenly his house was cursed. His children are far from safety, crushed in court without a defender. The hungry consume his harvest, taking it even from among thorns, and the thirsty pant after his wealth. For hardship does not spring from the soil, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. Yet man is born to trouble, as surely as sparks fly upwards. But if it were I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. He bestows rain on the earth. He sent water upon the countryside. The lowly he sets on high, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He thwarts the plans of the crafty, so that his hand achieves no success. He catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are swept away. Darkness comes upon them in the daytime. At noon they grope as in the night. He saves the needy from the sword in their mouth. He saves them from the clutches of the power. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts its mouth. Blessed is the man whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hand also heals. From 6 calamities he will rescue you. In 7 no harm will befall you. In famine he will ransom you from death, and in battle from the stroke of the sword. You will be protected from the lash of the tongue, and need not fear when destruction comes. You will laugh at destruction and famine, and need not fear the beasts of the earth. For you will have a covenant with the stones of the fields, and the wild animals will be at peace with you. You will know that your tent is secure. You will take stock of your property and find nothing missing. You will know that your children will be many, and your descendants like the grass of the earth. You will come to the grave in full vigor, like sheaves gathered in season. We have examined this, and it is true, so hear it and apply it to yourself. Then Job replied to Eliphaz, If only my anguish could be weighed, and all my miseries be placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sands of the sea. No wonder my words have been impetuous. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me. Does a wild donkey bray when it has grass, or an ox bellow when it has fodder? Is tasteless food eaten without salt? Or is there flavor in the white of an egg? I refuse to touch it. Such food makes me ill. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant what I hope for, that God would be willing to crush me, to let loose his hand and cut me off. Then I would still have this consolation. My joy is unrelenting pain, that I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What strength do I have that I should still hope? What prospect that I should be patient? Do I have the strength of stone? Is my flesh bronze? Do I have any power to help myself, now that success has been driven from me? A despairing man should have the devotion of his friends, even though he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. But my brothers are as undependable as intermittent streams, as the streams that overflow when darkened by thwarting ice, and swollen with melting snow, but that cease to flow in the dry season, and in the heat vanish from their channels. Caravans turn aside from their routes. They go up into the wasteland and perish. The caravans of Tema look for water. The traveling merchants of Sheba look in hope. They are distressed because they have been confident. They arrive there only to be disappointed. Now you too have proven to be of no help. You see something dreadful and are afraid. Have I ever said, give something on my behalf? Pay a ransom for me from your wealth? Deliver me from the hands of the enemy? Ransom me from the crutches of the ruthless? Teach me, and I'll be quiet. Show me where I have been wrong. How painful are honest words. But what do your arguments prove? Do you mean to correct what I say, and treat the words of a despairing man as wind? You would even cast lots for the fatherless and barter away your friend. But now be so kind as to look at me. Would I lie to your face? Relent. Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice? Next reading, Proverbs 1:20-33. Wisdom calls aloud in the streets. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of the noisy street she cries out. In the gateways of the city she makes her speech. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery, and fools hate knowledge? If you had responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. But since you rejected me when I called, and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you, then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, will not find me. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of the fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Here ends the reading. So we see in Proverbs here, the word to the simple. King Solomon teaches us about what it means to be wayward, and that if we ignore the advice of those who are giving us wisdom, we will end up, as it says, eating the fruit of our ways. But I think it's important at the end that it says, that we might listen, as I talked about in our sermon, the Shema, that we listen and therefore live in safety and at ease without fear of harm from God, because ultimately God is the one who lights our path and who protects our ways. So these are good words from King Solomon. Also, we read from Job. It's a sad reading from Job as he listens to Eliphaz, his friend. But I think Job gives us a lot to think about. And what do we do in our friendships when somebody else is suffering? Do we go off on them about how they've turned their back on God and how terrible they are to speak ill of God? I mean, I think there's a place and time for that, but right in the midst of their suffering, I think this is not a good idea. And you see this with Job. He talks about this anguish that he feels his friends are weighing upon him, and that his friends are treating him with correction, which he says, do you mean to correct what I say and treat the words of this despairing man as wind? You would even cast lots for the fatherless and barter away your friends. So he acknowledges that the words they might be saying could be fruitful, but at this time they just feel like they're more stones or pain that's been heaped upon him. So this is a good lesson to learn about how we treat our friends in the time of suffering. And lastly, we see the reading from Genesis, and we hear about Abram and Sarai, and how he then becomes Abraham and she becomes Sarah, and how this having Abram sleep with the maidservant Hagar was a terrible decision, and it caused for a lot of jealousy and anger and mistreatment from Sarah to Hagar, and how this wasn't a good idea. But God still wants to walk alongside with Abram in this covenant, and he does this by solidifying circumcision with him. So why circumcision? What is circumcision? Well, circumcision is to be set apart as the people of God. It's when you chop off the end of your male organ, and it's supposed to be an example to the rest of the world of those who are following in God's ways. So that's how they would be known. They would be set apart in this act of circumcision. And so we also are to be set apart, not by circumcision, but as it says, circumcision of the heart, that we might let God transform our heart, that we might be set apart to live out his example in godliness and righteousness. May that be my prayer for you today. Take care. God bless.